Watchmen, Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. This is a layered graphic novel with a serious tone and a dense visual reading experience. For comic book lovers who want a bridge into deeper reading, Watchmen is useful because it proves that a book can reward the same attention you already give to panels, page turns, layout, symbols, and repeated images. The key is not to treat it like a superhero story you rush through. Treat it like a carefully built object. Read slowly. Notice how a scene can mean one thing in dialogue and another thing in the background. That habit transfers directly into prose. In a novel, the page does not give you panels. The page gives you sentences. Watchmen trains you to notice design before moving to books where the design is hidden in rhythm, point of view, and structure. It is not the lightest starting point on this list. It is the clearest proof that comics can be literary without becoming dry. Start here if you like formal craft, moral pressure, alternate history, and stories that make every detail feel intentional. In the full guide, this is the book that sets the standard for how a comic reader can read more deeply without abandoning comics. The Sandman, Neil Gaiman and collaborators. This is a mythic graphic series with a literary tone and a strange, dreamlike reading experience. The Sandman works especially well for comic book lovers who already enjoy mood, symbolism, folklore, and stories that shift shape from volume to volume. It does not ask you to move from comics into prose by giving up visual imagination. It expands visual imagination until prose starts to feel easier. Many readers who struggle with ordinary novels do not actually struggle with language, they struggle with entry points. The Sandman gives you recognizable comic structure while surrounding it with myth, history, horror, fantasy, and literary reference. That combination makes it a smart bridge toward authors like Neil Gaiman, Terry Pratchett, and Stephen King later in this guide. Read it when you want atmosphere more than speed. Read it when you are comfortable with a series that changes tone. The reward is not one simple lane. The reward is learning how stories can feel connected by theme rather than by constant action. If Watchmen teaches structure, The Sandman teaches texture. For a comic reader who wants prose to feel less flat, that lesson matters. Saga, Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is a vivid space fantasy comic with a warm adult character-driven reading experience. Saga is one of the easiest bridges for comic book lovers who want books to feel alive from the first page. It has the visual energy that many readers expect from comics, but its real strength is how clearly it uses voice, pacing, and intimate stakes. That makes it a useful halfway point between a graphic series and a prose series like Red Rising or The Expanse. You are not reading it because it is difficult. You are reading it because it makes narrative momentum feel natural. The lesson for prose is simple. A book does not need constant explosions to feel fast. It needs strong contrasts, clear wants, and scenes that change the emotional pressure. Saga also helps readers understand that a big universe can still be approachable when the emotional line is easy to follow. Start here if you like space settings, family pressure, strange societies, and a tone that can move from funny to serious without losing clarity. It is not a substitute for novels. It is a bridge that makes longer speculative fiction feel less intimidating. That is why it belongs near the front of a comics to prose guide. V for Vendetta, Alan Moore and David Lloyd. This is a political graphic novel with a sharp tone and a focused atmosphere of pressure, control, and resistance. V for Vendetta belongs in this guide because many comic book lovers enjoy big ideas, but they often meet those ideas through masks, symbols, and visual contrast. This book uses those tools directly. It is a good bridge into prose that deals with power, surveillance, civic fear, and personal conviction. The important beginner note is that you should read it for atmosphere and argument, not only for action. The pages ask you to think about how a society feels when every choice seems watched. That kind of reading prepares you for dystopian novels, political science fiction, and literary thrillers. If you like comics because they can turn one image into an idea, this is a natural next step. It also teaches patience. Some scenes are quieter than a modern action reader may expect. That quiet is part of the point. It gives the book its controlled, serious pressure. Start here if you want a graphic work that feels direct, symbolic, and adult without needing a large shared universe. Then move toward prose that carries the same tension through language instead of panels. Invincible, Robert Kirkman and Cory Walker. This is a superhero comic with a fast pace, a clear emotional hook, and a long-form series feeling. Invincible is useful for comic book lovers who want to keep the pleasure of superhero storytelling while slowly building stamina for bigger books. It has many of the surface qualities that make superhero comics easy to start. It has color, momentum, power, family pressure, and a sense that the world can suddenly get larger. The reason it belongs in a prose bridge guide is that it also trains a reader to stay with a long continuity. That skill matters when you move into fantasy and science fiction series. A long prose series can feel intimidating because there are no panels to pull you forward. Invincible helps you understand the pleasure of slow accumulation. Characters deepen, conflicts widen. Earlier details gain new weight. You do not need to memorize everything. You only need to keep reading in a steady order. Start here if you like superhero energy, big consequences, and a story that grows beyond its first impression. After that, books like Red Rising or Stormfront may feel much easier to enter. The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman and Tony Moore. This is a stark survival comic with a tense tone and a long, character-focused reading experience. The Walking Dead is a strong bridge for comic book lovers who care less about powers and more about pressure. It shows how a simple premise can support a long series when the real engine is group behavior, fear, trust, and exhaustion. That is also a major skill for reading prose. Many novels are not built around constant spectacle. They are built around choices under strain. This series teaches you to track how a group changes when the world around it becomes harsher. It also prepares you for prose horror, post-apocalyptic fiction, and darker fantasy where mood matters as much as plot. If you usually choose comics because the visuals make danger feel immediate, pay attention here to pacing. Notice how quiet scenes can increase tension instead of lowering it. That awareness transfers well to novels where the scariest moment may be a sentence, not an image. Start here if you want a long, accessible series with a clear survival frame and a serious tone. It is one of the cleanest bridges from comic pacing into prose tension. American Gods, Neil Gaiman. This is a modern fantasy novel with a mythic tone and a road trip feeling across a strange version of America. American Gods is the prose bridge I would consider after a reader enjoys The Sandman. It keeps the sense of folklore, symbol, dream logic, and old stories moving through the modern world. The difference is that the images now have to form in your head. That is not a weakness. It is the skill prose gives you. Comic readers are often strong visual thinkers already, so this book can feel more natural than expected. The best way to read it is slowly enough to enjoy the mood. Do not demand that every chapter behave like a superhero issue. Let the texture build. The novel rewards readers who like atmosphere, mythology, Americana, and a sense that ordinary places can carry hidden meaning. It is also useful because it shows how prose can shift from dry humor to dread to wonder without changing format. Start here if you want your first serious prose jump to still feel visually rich. For many comic book lovers, this is where novels begin to feel less like homework and more like another form of panel art. Good Omens, Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. This is a comic fantasy novel with a warm, witty tone and a very accessible reading experience. Good Omens is one of the safest prose bridges for comic book lovers who want personality on every page. It works because the sentences have rhythm. The narration has a clear voice. The scenes move quickly. The book also has the kind of oddball confidence that many readers love in comics. Instead of asking you to study a huge fantasy map, it invites you into a playful version of supernatural comedy. That makes it especially useful if you find dense prose tiring. You can read a chapter and feel progress immediately. You can enjoy the jokes without needing a lore notebook. The larger lesson is that prose does not have to be solemn to be smart. It can be clever, humane, fast, and still carefully made. Start here if you like banter, strange partnerships, moral comedy, and stories where the voice is part of the entertainment. It is also a good companion pick after The Sandman, because it keeps Neil Gaiman close while adding Terry Pratchett's lighter comic control. For a hesitant prose reader, that combination lowers the barrier. Stormfront, Jim Butcher. This is an urban fantasy novel with a detective frame, a quick pace, and a familiar modern setting touched by magic. Stormfront is a practical bridge for comic book lovers because it starts from a rhythm many comic readers already understand. There is a clear case structure. There is a distinct central voice. There is supernatural action without requiring a giant invented world on page 1. That makes it easier than many epic fantasy starters. You are not asked to learn a kingdom, a family tree, and a magic history before the story begins. You are asked to follow a narrator through a city where strange things have rules. This is why urban fantasy often works well for readers coming from superhero comics. It gives you powers, danger, moral choices, recurring casts, and a case-by-case structure that feels almost like issues in a series. Start here if you want a prose book that still has genre momentum. It is not the most literary pick on the list. It is here because it lowers friction. Sometimes the best bridge is the one that makes the next book feel possible. Red Rising, Pierce Brown. This is a fast science fiction novel with a competitive structure, a sharp class conflict frame, and a high momentum reading experience. Red Rising is a strong bridge for comic book lovers who want prose to move with the force of a big visual story. It has clear factions, strong contrasts, memorable symbols, and a sense of scale that grows quickly. Those qualities make it friendly to readers who are used to visual worlds. The important expectation is that it is not a graphic novel in disguise. It uses prose to create speed through voice, pressure, training, rivalry, and social hierarchy. That is a useful skill to notice. When a novel feels fast, it is often because the reader always understands what is at stake in the scene. Red Rising makes that easy. Start here if you like bold pacing, faction identity, science fiction spectacle, and stories that feel accessible without feeling small. It is also a good next step after Saga or Invincible, because it keeps the energy high while removing the visual support. For many comic readers, this is the prose pick that proves long chapters can still feel like forward motion. The Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss. This is a lyrical fantasy novel with a reflective tone and a storytelling experience built around memory, craft, music, and legend. The Name of the Wind is not the fastest bridge from comics into prose. It is the bridge for readers who want language to carry the magic. If you enjoy comics with strong narration, mythic framing, or a sense of personal legend, this book can work very well. The key is to enter it for voice, not for constant action. Some comic book lovers bounce off prose because they expect every page to behave like a visual beat. This novel teaches a different pleasure. It shows how a sentence can create atmosphere before anything large happens. It also rewards readers who enjoy a school setting, artistic identity, and the feeling of a life being shaped through stories. Start here when you are ready for a slower, richer fantasy voice. Do not start here if you need the shortest path from panels to pages. For that, choose Good Omens or Stormfront first. But once you want prose to feel beautiful rather than merely readable, this is an important recommendation. The Gunslinger, Stephen King. This is a lean, dark fantasy novel with a Western tone, a spare voice, and a strange mythic landscape. The Gunslinger works as a final bridge pick because it is short enough to try, but unusual enough to show what prose can do that comics often handle differently. It does not explain everything immediately. It creates mood through distance, heat, silence, pursuit, and ritual. For comic book lovers, that can feel strange at first. There are fewer visual anchors. There is more empty space. That space is part of the reading experience. If you like the Sandman, American Gods, or darker comics with mythic edges, this book can become a useful doorway into Stephen King's larger fantasy territory. The best beginner approach is simple. Treat it as a mood piece before treating it as a whole universe. Read the first book to test the tone, then decide whether the larger series is for you. That keeps the commitment low and the decision clear. In this guide, The Gunslinger is not the easiest recommendation. It is the one for readers who want prose to feel stark, symbolic, and slightly haunted. It closes the bridge by showing that books can create powerful images without drawing them.